Hello, everybody. I'm Brian P. Easton, the author of the autobiography of a werewolf hunter series, and this is Whiskey with the Werewolf Hunter.
Hello, darkness, my old friend. I've come to talk with you again, because a vision softly creeping left its scenes while I was sleeping, and the vision that was planted in my brain still remains within the sound of silence.
Welcome back for April's edition of Whiskey with the Werewolf Hunter. We're glad you could join us for a while, and as you can see, we are not at the Werewolf Bar tonight. In fact, we're going to be visiting with some people moving into more of the horror related themes that we kind of neglect from time to time on the show. You know, we talk about my book series and we talk about all the projects we've got coming up, and things get lost in the shuffle sometimes. And with that in mind, I decided to kind of get it back to some monster stuff, get it back to talking about horror in cinema and what have you. And for that purpose, I have got some of the best people in the world to talk about that. And we'll get more into that a little bit later. First, I want to update you on a few things. The first thing to say is that the Winter Fox Journal's Volume 2 audiobook, the files are uploaded and are being finalized. I've said that before, I know, and we've run into trouble, but I have to tell you, I personally went through and listened to each and every section of the audiobook, wrote down what was missing. There were parts where it cut off, there were parts where the volume varied, and I went through, like I said, personally, and went through it so I can vouch for this as long as the files are the same as I left them last. Anyway, that's being finalized, and so the Winter Fox Journal's Volume 2 audiobook should be available any day, and I will keep you updated on my Facebook page. Second thing to say is regarding the Legends of the Werewolf Hunter anthology, Legends of the Werewolf Hunter Book 2. We tried a Kickstarter campaign on that, and unfortunately, we did not meet our goal. I'm not sure what the next step is going to be. We're kind of in a holding pattern right now, and we're going to wait and see. So as I was saying at the beginning of the show, the horror element has kind of been neglected lately on Whiskey with the Werewolf Hunter, and that's too bad because I really want to make this a place where we can talk about those things, especially the monsters, which is what we're mostly concerned with, at least I am. When I talk about horror, I'm talking about monster movies. And so I have some friends, and they are very knowledgeable on the subject, and they rub shoulders with some of the biggest names in horror. And we're going to have them on for you and discuss their favorite monsters. So we're going to get started with that. Let's take it back down to the bar. So tonight we are talking with a few friends who enjoy the horror genre in one form or another. And our first guest is artist, artisan, and aficionado of all things strange and beautiful, Chaa. Welcome to the Werewolf Bar.
Thanks for having me, Brian.
Now, as you know, and I think everybody knows who's watching this by now, that Whiskey with the Werewolf Hunter is my internet presence on the web. It's for my book series. But it was also originally conceived as a venue to discuss monster hunting as a kind of a subgenre and the horror genre, at large. So, like I told everyone earlier in the introduction, we've kind of gotten away from discussing the horror element. And so I thank you for taking some time to talk with us a little bit about that and to help us get back on track. So to start off, can you tell us a little bit about how you kind of came to connect with things that are dark and mysterious?
Well, there's no specific moment that I can recall, but I was raised Catholic, so at an early age we were exposed to dark, macabre looking things and rituals and marble statues and blood stuff, and I'm just like, I guess I got used to it there. And my big sister liked a lot of darker things like Metallica and Clive Barker, and she's 7 years older than me, so of course I wanted to emulate my big sister.
Right.
And she was friends with someone who was heavily into Wicca and liked to dry herbs and was very much into the paranormal phenomenon. And so I just gradually over time became more exposed to the people I know and trust were interested, and it just kind of came naturally. Um,
Okay. So, like I mentioned in my introduction, you have an interest in art and in crafting things, and have made some wonderful objects, which I have
Thank you.
personally bought from you. So tell me, is there a connection between some of these lovely things that you create and that dark and mysterious element that we were just talking about?
well, I find that stuff beautiful, and just because something is dark doesn't mean it's evil. So I like to sometimes do the darker stuff to highlight just how beautiful and precious and admirable it is. It looks different than what we're used to. And I think that's kind of like the inspiration for what a lot of horror is that it's something that is like unusual to us, and so it's scary to us, but it might be natural to someone else and may not be remotely terrifying to them.
Sure. But what about horror? Because that's what we're really talking about here. Some people, they're really drawn toward splatter and toward, the gore fest. And people like me, I prefer atmosphere and a good gut punch of a story. Not that the two are necessarily mutually exclusive, but, if you have something to choose from, something to watch or to read, where do your proclivities lie? Are you more along the lines of the atmosphere and the jump scares or the splatter, or do you like monsters, or what draws you to something among other things?
I think kind of the atmosphere and how creative something is. Like, I like a little bit of everything. I'm not much for the jump scares and just guy running up, stab you a bunch of times with scary mask on. I like things like when animals go wrong. Like when you see something like a horse walking down the road, and from a distance you're like, oh, it's, the horse has a little limp. Maybe, he needs something. And you get closer and you realize he's like rotting and decaying, and there's something demonic possessing him. That scares the shit out of me,
So,
and I love that.
So it's like an element of surprise there.
Well, it's where something is not so different from its original thing, but it's altered in such a way as to make your brain go, there is something wrong here.
Okay.
Like a lot of my nightmares that really terrify me are the ones that are more nature themed, but there's something there that has been twisted to make it just feel viscerally wrong in my soul.
I see.
Like decaying animals, rabies, like kind of those kinds of viruses,
Right.
demonic possession of something that looks cute and innocent, but like not like something like when you got the doll, and obviously the doll's creepy and it's designed to look creepy, but I mean like something that's truly innocent and innocuous, and then it goes around and starts
I
killing.
see. Okay, yeah, well, that's an interesting perspective. So maybe there's something about starting with a reality that you understand, and then you can appreciate a kind of a grounding there, and then knowing that that exists in real life, then the next step is to mutate it, change it some
Yes,
way, and
to
that's
pervert
and
it
then
in
that's
some
frightening.
way.
Yeah, I
Because
can.
it takes something that you've invested this lifelong amount of trust and security in, and turning it into the absolute opposite of that, but not so obvious, so where you're still perhaps let in until it's too late.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, my precious pet, I can't believe it's been 10 years without you. And you're like, oh, yeah, you've been dead for 10 years. And it looks up at you and you realize its eyes are empty.
Yes.
And-
And I knew a lady who was scared. What frightened her was things that could really happen. Like, didn't matter how supernatural or horrifying a movie could be, if it was something that could actually happen, or she thought it could actually happen, that was what was scary for her. But talking about things that are mutating and strange, you and I share an active interest in artificial intelligence and the development and the progression of that, especially what it can do creatively. Now, recognizing that there is a division in opinion about this technology, as an artist yourself, can you give us your thoughts on where you think all this might be going? I mean, is it just another medium for the computer and for art in the evolution of things, or are we headed for a Skynet type situation?
I don't know how many times we thought we were about to orchestrate our own apocalypse. Except in climate change, it hasn't happened yet. I don't think we're in any danger. It can do many cool things, but I don't think AI is at any point where it can like become sentient and harm us. The only way it can do us harm is via other people using it as a tool for harm.
True, true. What about the controversy about AI is stealing?
Well, as an artist who likes to paint, create my own things, like the problem is I see both sides. So when something looks like it's AI generated and it could have been something that someone would have painted, I feel like a little bit like that's robbery, but at the same time, sometimes AI can be used to make something that would be almost impossible for any one person to do. Let's say we have someone who has limited ability to create something because maybe they have physical limitations or monetary limitations and they want to make a movie. And they take little clip bits that they have generated and they use their own creative idea to string those together to make a little mini movie using AI, but it's under their direction. I think that's wonderful because I've seen some disturbing, terrifying, hilarious things, and I'm like, oh, thanks, AI.
And you definitely gravitate. You definitely gravitate
yeah.
toward that more bizarre forms of that, don't you? The more outlandish the creation, the better you like it.
The more nonsensical, disturbing, and perverse. Like if it's like this meat supermarket with all these monsters there, and it's just everything looks slimy and disgusting, but they have British accents and they're just talking like they were meeting up after tea. That juxtaposition is just gorgeous.
I saw that. I don't know. I'm not sure what it's called. Do you remember what it's called?
I favorited it so I can enjoy it again later.
It's a movie somebody has put together, generated about some kind of a outlandish, horrifying supermarket. I don't know what the name of it is. For me, it was very disturbing. She thought it was beautiful. So, I mean, that's...
Oh, how's the family doing? I ate them. Have you seen the prices on potatoes?
Yeah, well, the prices on anything at the grocery store is horror enough these days.
That was great.
So, very good then. Thanks, Siggy. I want to thank you for talking with us this evening and for sharing your thoughts with us.
You're welcome, and thank you for having me.
Okay. My next guest is Greg, who is not only a virtual encyclopedia of the cinema and a movie quote champion, but the creator and host of Cha's Watch List. Welcome to the show, Greg. Glad to have you.
Thanks for having me on.
So I think it was about this time last year, you and I...
Wow.
Was it about this time last year?
I have no idea. I think ever since the pandemic, time has lost all meaning.
Yeah.
Sorry.
But I think it was about a year ago that you and I did a countdown of our favorite Westerns on your channel. So to start things off, how about telling us a little bit about Cha's Watch List?
It's just I'm a big fan of film, and I just like talking about movies. And I've always found it fun, the idea of like going through movies, stacking up your CDs and looking through and stuff. It's just a fun way to kind of like, make rankings and stuff. It's always kind of an interesting question, I think. If you ask somebody, hey, what's your favorite movie of all time? What's your favorite, one of your favorites? And if it's something you've never seen, you're like, wow, that movie's your favorite. It's a heavy statement. It's a big statement. So, and a lot of times, people have the same kind of top tens when you talk about general things like horror. Here we're talking about horror. And other like major genres, like what's your 10 favorite horror movies, and a lot of those are going to generally be the same, not that interesting, but it's those one-offs. Like my wife has In Dreams on her top 10 horror films of all time. Most people are like, really? And then they think like, hey, I haven't seen that in a really long time.
Right.
It kind of is an excuse to go rewatch something. It's a big statement. Somebody tells you it's the best book they ever read in their life. You think, well, maybe I should try that.
Right. I mean, when you get immersed into something to a point, it seems like you start coming back around to the things that got left behind. Yeah. To me. So, talking about horror movies and horror in general, and we're trying to steer Whiskey with the Werewolf Hunter a little bit back into familiar terrain. for fans of horror. And not just my book series, which we have been focusing on quite a bit in the last year or so. So you've been around some pretty big names in the industry in horror films, haven't you?
Yeah, my wife and I have been. I mean, she's dwarfs my record, but I've been to literal hundreds of cons at this point. So there's only natural that you would come across some people, in the elevators, in the rooms, and a lot of celebrities and things. They make much of their living is made by going to conventions and things. People like, well, Sid Haig has passed away now, but Sid Haig, Bill Moseley, those kind of guys. You'll see them. Tom Savini. Those are the kind of guys you'll see 10, 12 times a year, just in passing and stuff. So just being around, it's a numbers game. It's a numbers game. Eventually you're going to kind of run into people.
Yeah, yeah, and not just horror celebrities either, right?
Yeah, I mean all kinds of people. Yeah.
I was with you guys at a couple of them. I remember meeting Loretta Swit from MASH in an elevator one time, and Bernie Coppell from the Doc from Love Boat,
Wrestling is another thing. A lot of times you'll be set up. I should say my wife and I, we sort of work the circuit, as they say. So we work we go around. We're kind of like modern day carnies. We go from show to show and stuff. And yeah, you'll be oftentimes set up across, I'll be like, that's Brutus the Barber Beefcake over there. Or that's Ted $1 Million Man, Ted DiBiase or whatever. So you see some of those older names and things.
Well, have you ever gotten to know any of these people on a recognize you type basis?
Yeah, those people I kind of mentioned already. Those people will say hello or whatever. My wife always makes cookies, so we'll have a thing like that. I think you gave me a little heads up on the questions you were going to ask, so so yes, I have had and this is a little bit self-serving because it's sort of a nice little memory for me personally, but I was kind of hard pressed to think of a good story or whatever. But I used to, when I first came around on the scene or whatever, I was sort of into doing a lot of sideshow circusy kind of things, and I had done a bunch of fire acts, fire eating, fire breathing, and juggling and things like that as part of a juggling club and stuff. And John Kassir, who is the crypt keeper, and he's like a wonderful, like fun, always hamming it up. You'll be at a show and he'll go and he'll get the microphone and he'll do the announcements and he'll say like, hey. He'll do his crypt keeper voice and he'll, hey kiddies and boils. He does all that fun stuff. So he really hams it up and it's really cool. So he, I guess I didn't even realize it was outside. I was doing like a performance. I was juggling fire and spitting it or whatever I was doing, And he, the next day he came up and he was like, hey, I saw you do that. And he, he was just chatting with me about his own experiences doing some street performing, etc., things like that. And he said, I got some pictures of you from your thing last night. And he was showing me his phone. And I was like, John Kassir has pictures of me on his phone. It was really a cool moment, right? I mean, obviously, it's a little self-serving. It's like kind of like a personal memory or whatever. And so I think I'm hard-pressed to really, because I just have normal interactions with people. I don't really, I prefer I kind of steer away from the oddball, like the more, formal intro. Yes, nice to meet you, John Carpenter.
Right.
That's the stuff I kind of steer away from. But I like those organic moments, I guess. So that was
my
answer to that.
That's awesome. Yeah. So you and I have similar interests, and since we first met, we found this out very quickly in terms of what we like in popular culture: Cormac McCarthy, Marvel Comics, Glengarry Glen Ross, and westerns, to name a few. But horror is another one of those areas where we overlap. But I think maybe what you find appealing in horror and what I like in a horror movie isn't exactly the same thing. So can you tell us a little bit about what you look for in a horror movie, having seen so many and being immersed in the culture as you are? What are you drawn to that recommends one over another?
Well, I mean, there's very few. I mean, there's millions and millions. There's hundreds of thousands of movies out there, and so there is always something for everyone. And I think horror is kind of in that unique position where there's so much of it, and there's always something for everybody to like, and I think that's kind of a cool thing. Me personally, I tend to like. Well, first of all, my favorite is like monsters. I love monsters. Like that's my big thing. Yeah. That's gonna get me over anything else. And but for me, I think what really draws me to the horror genre is that, like, unlike other genres, they're always first of all, originality. That's a big thing for me. Like originality in anything, in any field, music, books, literature, acting, movies, whatever. Horror films are often quite original, and they're often really like to push the envelope. You know, I like to see new and unusual things, and I like to see the extremes of human behavior. I don't want to see, you know, hey, it's somebody's shift at, like, you know, at the Subway, he's just slicing meat for 2 hours. You know, I want to see as far beyond that as you can get. You know, give me an original story, give me some, you know, it's really visceral, really extreme moments in people's lives, and, you know, the terror, the stress, you know, like, you want to be on the screen with them. You know, like, oh my God, what are you gonna do? This is so, you know.
Yeah, or maybe you don't.
Oh yeah, you don't. Yeah. Well, you want to live vicariously. You don't want to have those experiences in your own life for real. And so, like, but we do like to experience them. What do you say? Vicariously. Thank you. That's exactly what I was looking for.
So when you're talking about this kind of a thing, you know, where does the gore factor come in? Into you? You know,
I know some people don't like it. Yeah, sorry.
Well, you know, I think about Stephen King. Stephen King wrote a book called Dance Macabre, which is basically his treatise on what horror movies and horror / terror, you know, amounts to. He tries to do two things. He tries to horrify, he tries to terrify, and if he can't do that, he said to go for the gross out.
Yeah.
Now, to me, the gross out with gore, in and of itself, is, I don't want to see that. But you like it, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Like I think it's like I know, like, and when I recommend movies to people, or I talk to people about movies, you know, and I say, oh this movie's amazing. Recently I was talking about Possessor, which I felt was Brandon Cronenberg's new movie, or last new movie, I guess. He's only made 3, but there's some parts in that are so brutal and so bloody, and I love that. But when I tell somebody, you know, like, hey, this might not be for you, you know, and I know it's not for everyone, but I mean, to me, like, in my daily, I'm like kind of like a pacifist in my daily life. I don't want to do any harm to anyone, and I don't want anything bad to happen to anyone. But I think, like, but I want that in that avenue, right, in that venue.
Yeah. Or as King would put it, you got to let the alligators keep the alligators in the basement, and so you have to feed your taste for these things, cool, you know, vicariously, so the alligators stay in the basement.
That's a really cool. That's I've not heard the book. Now you've mentioned that just now, of course, Dance Macabre, but you've also mentioned it in the past with me, and I'd never really had any interest in that book before. I mean, not like I had any disinterest in it, I just never really. But you've always talked so passionately about that book, and I know it's meant a lot to you. So I'm like, man, I probably got to read that.
My favorite Stephen King book.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
Dance Macabre, probably the only Stephen King book that I've read more than once. I mean, don't get me wrong, Stephen King's a great storyteller. Some of my favorite things that he's written, though, are not horror. Some of the most interesting books he's written don't fall into that genre. But I know you rank these things. You like to rank your movies in every genre. So, what are your top 5 horror movies? I would just the old chestnut. Give us a top 5.
That old chestnut. Yeah, you kind of gave me a little heads up on these things, which I appreciate. And you know, to me, like, this, I'm like, I can't pull this out. You know, like, I can't give a definitive. I did mention that these things are not that these kind of questions, like, are interesting in some regard, and in some regard they're not. I don't really have my 10 put together because it's really difficult.
You don't have a top 10 horror film put together?
I do, but I haven't whittled it down.
Okay, it's not canon.
I'll tell you my top 3.
Okay, all right, top 3.
My favorite one is, for sure, is going to be Bram Stoker's Dracula. And I think because I talk about how much I love monsters and stuff, and I should also say, like, practical effects are very important to me. That movie to me is, like, perfect. I mean, like, you know, it's the soundtrack, all the different creatures that you get to see on the screen and stuff. Just how he permeates everything. Like, you know, they'll be on the train, and the window you can see his eyes in the background. I mean, it's just so well made. I just, it's my favorite. My favorite then comes up, very strong second, would be The Thing. John Carpenter's The Thing.
John Carpenter, so yeah.
Again, I mean, that's probably most people's top 5s. That one's going to be. I've got others, like, I mean, Silence of the Lambs, I think, is a perfect film. It's a really incredible movie. And actually, just as an aside, recently, my wife and I, we saw that you can stay in the Buffalo Bills house, you know? Somebody bought it, and they turned it into a bed and breakfast. And it's like...
What's for breakfast?
And it's like $500 a night to something to stay there. But you get the whole house. So if you had different, you know, you split it up with a few couples. However, there's an hourly rate of like $100 an hour where you can just go in and see the house. And I'm like...
What are you doing?
An hour? Yeah, what are you doing in your hour? Hey, honey, let's go have sex in the Buffalo Bill house, and then thanks We'll just drop the keys by the door. It's really kind of a funny thing, but that was recently we saw that you could do that.
Okay, so you, like me, like the monsters.
Oh yeah.
Because that's horror. A horror movie to me is a good monster movie. Not that I don't like or appreciate ones with good, plot twists and sucker punches, and the atmosphere, which I
variety is the spice
adore.
of life. Yeah.
But when it comes to monsters, do you have a favorite monster? Beastie
So I
creature?
mentioned that I do really love the practical effects, and like to me, like they're not making any like there's never. I would be amazed if they ever made a really great monster film from this point forward, because I think that like it's all cartoons, to me, and that's my own opinion. Like that's just my own preferences. So I think probably my top 4, and this is kind of off the cuff, kind of like a little bit of thought. It's going to be, of course, I mentioned The Thing, incredible creature there, like very, just keeps changing form. And if you haven't, if you're like one of the people that has not seen that movie, you should absolutely see it. The Fly, that's David Cronenberg's The Fly. You talked about
Jeff Goldblum.
the idea of disgust earlier, and that's definitely on
yeah.
this. In fact, I was at a show and somebody saw The Fly and they were like, "Oh yeah," and their friend was like, "Oh, I've never seen this movie before," and they said, "Don't eat anything that you want to eat again while you're watching it." And I'm like, "Is that a thing? Is that really a thing?" And they said, "Yeah, like they can't eat." I don't remember what movie they said. They said they watched some movie and they couldn't eat white mac and cheese anymore because of that. And then of course, the Alien Queen from Aliens, the second Alien movie, can't beat her. She's amazing. Yeah. And I think rounding out my little quadrology there would be the Blob from the 1980s film.
So your monsters definitely seem to trend more sci-fi than supernatural.
Well, I think that this is a whole tangent you can get into, but sci-fi and horror are hand in hand.
Right. But I'm saying supernatural as opposed to science. Monster like the Blob is not any kind of creature from hell or anything like that.
I see what you're saying.
Where you have to explain werewolves and vampires through some kind of a supernatural agency. There wasn't one
supernatural versus sci-fi.
Yeah, so Dracula was really the only supernatural monster.
I would include him too if I didn't. Again, this is like somewhat off the cuff, but he takes so many amazing forms. In fact, actually, I know I'm not saying this to play to the home team here, but like in terms of the major standard archetypes: mummy, werewolf, vampire, Frankenstein. Those major universal archetypes. The werewolf is my favorite by far, because like the transformation is so incredible, like the look of the werewolf is so awesome, and all of the lore, and you on your show and stuff always you or your guests kind of highlighting all these interesting other facets, and there's just so much to it, and but he's definitely my favorite, and I think it's centered on that transformation and that anguish.
Well, that's good. That's good that you said that. Here.
Otherwise, you're getting kicked off
here on the show.
It's true, though.
But let's say we're talking about the effects. So let's say that you're making a film and you only have X amount of dollars to spend, which you would, and it's going to be a fairly low budget production. Which is not to say it's not going to be good. Some of the most intimate, close set, interesting movies I've seen have been shot on a shoestring budget.
Absolutely.
So if you're making a movie, where does your money go? Script, actors, special effects, direction. Can you rank those?
Oh, rank the like what?
What would the bulk of your money go to make if you're going to shoot a story?
It's tough because I think it's funny when you're talking about like you're making this show now. Audio is really like audio you need. Video you can forgive, but you've got to have good audio. People can't hear you. But I think in general, I think anything you're lacking in is gonna be. I think it's got to be. I know this is like kind of a boring answer because I think about it like the best movie, my favorite all time movies. The score is always the best. I don't think I could have a favorite movie and not think the score is one of the the best scores there is. So that's so important. But then of course I love practical effects. The effects have got to be great. If you don't have actors, so it's really kind of like I think you really got to have it all. Although I guess you can. I've seen tons of god awful movies, but they had a great monster. You think like Cellar Dweller or one of these kinds of things where you're like the whole movie you can throw away.
Yeah, you can forgive a lot
if you've got a great monster in there. So maybe that's my answer.
Yeah, you can forgive a whole lot just for the sake of a good monster. For me, I mean, if you don't have the story is the foundation. 'Cause
Yeah.
I'm the writer.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh, that makes sense.
If you don't have the story, everything else falls apart. I mean, we've all seen great actors in horrible roles,
that's
you know,
true, too.
and through no fault of their own. But anyway, thanks for sitting down with us for a few minutes tonight, Greg. It was good to get your
Thanks
perspective
for having me. Yeah.
on some of these things, and we'll be right back. So our last guest for tonight is my friend Jill from Lix, that's Lix, who is not only a horror movie connoisseur, but a continentally trained chocolatier and materfamilias of the American horror con circuit. Jill, welcome to Whiskey with the Werewolf Hunter.
Thank you, Brian.
So for starters, tell us a little bit about your business, Lix, and how you got started in the horror biz.
Well, I've loved horror movies since I was a kid. Like, in the 80s, I think we had like Friday the 13th taped illegally, and I was watching it over and over, and I really grew up with 80s horror and just a big fan. I was drawn to it like so many of us who love horror movies. So when I grew up, I started to shop, and it was kind of for all the subcultures in the area. But then I started going to conventions like Comic-Con, and I would find some people selling horror teas, and I'm like, there's a company called Cinema Wasteland, and I bought wholesale from them and sold them at my store, and then that turned out to be my first horror convention that I set up at.
Okay. So you just kind of a very organic transition from
was.
watching Friday the 13th bootlegs to,
Yeah.
to the horror
Yeah,
con.
yeah.
Okay. So as I mentioned before with previous guests, this channel was primarily designed to promote my book series, but we also want to focus on horror in the horror genre in general, and we've fallen away from that here in the last year or so, and so I want to thank you for coming by tonight, because if anyone loves this genre more than you, I don't know who they are.
Oh.
Okay.
Wow.
So in doing this, with doing the horror convention coast to coast, you've met some horror luminaries over the years, isn't that right?
I have. I see like B movie stars, like people from Dawn of the Dead, like Ken Foray, and people like Dee Wallace Stone, who she's in so many movies, like E.T. and
The Howling.
Obviously, we love The Howling, and The Frighteners and everything. I see them a lot. I've met Bill Moseley 100 times. He knows me because I give him cookies all the time. So. But as far as bigger names, I've met John Carpenter, I've met Dario Argento, and I've met like Clive Barker. So pretty cool.
That's a pretty big name in
Yeah.
the luminaries
Might
division.
be one of my favorites, maybe. Okay, my favorite.
Oh, Clive Barker, yeah. So you've watched all of his movies,
Yes, I have.
I'm assuming. And how many horror movies would you say that you watch in a given month? Or break it down by week if that's easier. And of those that you've been able to keep track of, have you been able to keep track of your favorites?
Well, of course, because my husband loves doing top 10s, so I'm doing a lot of top 10 lists, so I know
Right.
a lot of my favorites. But I would say about just over half of what I watch is horror, because I love all movies.
Okay.
I'm a cinephile. So, but I would say if I watch 6 in a week, 4 are going to be horror.
Okay.
So, and sometimes I do watch one every day when I'm not working on the road or something like that. But as far as my favorites, I have always will say Hellraiser. That's my favorite movie, directed by Clive Barker. And then I also now most of my top 10, all of Clive Barker's going to be in there.
He's got his own.
maybe
He's got
not
his own
all,
little place there.
But yeah. So Clive, and then I've got The Exorcist, one of the scariest movies ever made. Still, I think. What else did I say? I said, The Others.
The other is very good. Yeah,
Yes.
ghost story movie. Mm-hmm.
Spanish
Yeah, I'm with you
director.
with that.
I
Yeah.
love it. And then I wanted to throw in an Italian horror, which is Demons.
Okay.
So, and then The Conjuring would be a fifth.
That whole series,
Well,
or
one
just
and
the-
two at least.
Okay.
But after that's a little sketchy. But I love James Wan as a horror director.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, is there something about those films that has a constant element to them that do they share something in common that appeals to you overall?
Well, yeah, because it's kind of a fear of the unknown, which I think is one of the scariest things. Like, what you don't know can it hurt you? In these movies, it seems to be pretty convincing that it can.
Pretty darn dangerous.
Well, so I think it's supernatural and fear of the unknown. Those are my favorites.
So you're kind of actually on the other end of the spectrum, where I was talking with Greg, and his top horror movies really didn't have anything to do with the supernatural. They were all more sci-fi based, like The Thing and The Blob, and I forget what else he named, but there wasn't. I mean, I think Bram Stoker's Dracula was the only one that had a supernatural
Absolutely.
element to it.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
you're sound like you're on the other end of that as far as the supernatural goes. Yeah, and I'm right there with you. I enjoy those.
For my favorites, but I love those movies too.
Sure.
So.
Oh yeah. Nobody's knocking The Blob for
Yeah,
crying out
come
loud.
on.
You know. So I know you're also a fan of the old trade paperback novels.
I am.
The old 70s, 80s horror, thick as a brick novels that you
Or
could
not.
used to be able to pick up
Yes,
everywhere, and you got quite a collection
Yeah.
of those.
I do.
Is it the same kind of thing you're drawn to with the books as the movies?
And in this case, I know that you're not supposed to judge a book by its cover, but in this case, I do.
Yeah.
If it's got puffy on it, puffy letters, awesome drawings, or the opening, it's got a cutout in it, and then you open it, and that is at the top of my list.
Yeah.
That's usually how I start choosing the books, and then I look, this author, or the synopsis, where it takes place, what it's about. I have about 300 trade paperbacks now,
Nice.
or paperbacks from the 70s, 80s, and I just love reading them, and my shirt even has some of them on it.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
we got
Yeah.
Clive Barker, we've got a lot of my favorites.
All right. Sort of, he had a Salem's Lot
Yes.
on there as well. We were talking about Stephen King earlier, and
How could you not?
yeah, I know you can't have a discussion of horror without bringing his name into it. So when I read a book and I really enjoy it, which I have to say is a treat for me because it doesn't happen that often that I really like a book. But I think most people do look at the author's catalog then to see what else that they may have written. And sometimes it turns out, the book itself turns out to be a one-trick pony. But there are others like Clive Barker who consistently seem to hit the mark. So Clive Barker, I guess, would be your favorite author, right?
Well, he was all my life. Like, he's king. Mm-hmm. Well, not Stephen.
Not Stephen King,
but
but-
you know, one of my friends said I used to read Stephen King, and then I felt like I graduated to Clive Barker because he's a little bit harder. Like meaner,
Right.
scarier.
Yeah.
But I love both of them. But one author I love is Barry Wood. And she has only maybe, 8 or 10. One of her most famous is called The Tribe. And but the reason I found her was because of this movie called In Dreams, another kind of supernatural horror movie. On my top 10 favorites by Neil Jordan, she wrote the book Doll's Eyes, which is loosely based on that.
Okay.
So, but some other authors are like Charles Grant, Whitley Strieber. I love Whitley. Do you like him?
I don't know.
He did The Hunger. He did,
The Hunger. Yeah.
Yeah, he did all kinds of great stuff.
Yeah, I haven't read that.
Yeah, but that's a great book, great movie, I think. Who else? Oh, Jack Ketchum, one of my favorites. You know him? Well, too bad he's passed. I miss him. And let's see. And then, the guy, Graham Masterton, he wrote The Manitou. He also, Thomas Luke is his, what is it called when they have another name?
Pen name?
Yeah, pen name.
Yeah.
So, if you see Thomas Luke, Graham Masterton, he's a...
Same guy.
He's good.
Okay, great. Hey, listen, thank you for coming by and sharing your thoughts with us tonight. And I want to thank everybody watching for tuning in as well. Thanks for coming by the Werewolf Bar tonight. I'm glad you could stop by for a while. Happy hunting and mind the moon.